afternoon, everyone. We're going to leave a few minutes for people to get signed in and audio going, and we encourage you to share your screen if you're comfortable doing that. And know many of you are probably trying to sneak lunch over the lunch hour too. So if you don't want to share your screen, that's okay too.
Now, can anybody hear me? It's Connie talking.
Yes, we can hear you, Connie.
Okay, good. My some blockers on, so I can't share my screen. I don't know how to unblock it though. I don't know.
We can see you're there. So if you aren't able to turn on your video, that's okay, Connie.
Well, I don't know. Well, here, you know what? There we go.
There you are.
And I can see my crazy hair.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jennifer Stapleton, and I am a consultant working with Inovia Foundation on the implementation of the Community Heart and Soul program. Online, we also have Molly Sanchez with Inovia Foundation, and I know we have Christy Reitz, and we also have Nolan with us today. Do we have anybody else from the foundation this afternoon? So several faces, and Rachel Quick is our marketing and communications, and she will be helping today in case there are any technical difficulties on my end, which occasionally happens. So welcome to all of you. This is our first of the series of 3 Getting Started webinars for our Community Heart and Soul program. If you haven't registered for the other webinars, I encourage you to do so. We'll be doing 1 webinar a month over the next couple of months in preparation for the application deadline, which will be in August. I want to talk a little bit as we're getting started today, and this will be a repeat for many of you, but I know some of you have not been able to participate in our previous sessions live. And so want to talk for a couple of minutes about Community Heart and Soul and what makes this program different than our other grant programs through Inovia. Community Heart and Soul is a specifically designed community involvement, community building model that will be implemented if you are awarded a grant through our grant program in your community. And it looks a little bit different from community to community in terms of how it's carried out, but the model is the same. It is a resident-driven planning community development process that will be supported by a coordinator in your community who will be supported by a coach who we will provide through Inovia Foundation. The goal of the program is to engage the entire population of a community. And if that is not everyone, it is making sure that you've done the appropriate mapping and ensure that you have representation of all aspects of your community, including those community members who often aren't actively involved and at the community table and discussions when they're occurring. Through this model and process, what you'll be doing is helping the community identify what the community members love most about your community, and you will be doing that through storytelling and the development of heart and soul statements, which we're going to be talking about in these webinars, what they want for the future of their community, and how to achieve that. And so at the end of this planning process, a product that comes out of it is a community action plan. It's your community's action plan that then takes you through next steps to protect what you love most about your community, and maybe develop new aspects, whether that be economic development, whether that be increasing community involvement. Community Heart and Soul is an award-winning, nationally recognized community development model. It received an award through the National American Planning Association, and it's been implemented in hundreds of communities across the country. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We're bringing to the Innovia region a very proven model that we think will benefit a large number of our communities. And it appears you agree with us because there are many of you who are interested. I have had questions from some of you who are with nonprofit organizations asking whether this may be a fit for your agency. And the answer to that is it may be, but if your focus is program specific and you're limited in your resources, in your time to the important programs that you're offering, it may not be the best fit for your organization, because going into this process, you can't have an agenda. It's not politically driven. There can't be a religious motivation behind it. It's really about community building. So through this process, most likely you will find what you're doing for programs aligns with community values, but you can't go into this looking for support for your program or with an agenda of a specific program already. If that's your case, and it probably is for many of your organizations, then our community grant program is probably a better fit specifically for your organization versus the Community Heart and Soul program, because this is about implementing a community development model. An overview of the grant program: it is a 2-year grant program. We'll be awarding 2-year grants. And again, it's a combination of funding and technical assistance. Through the foundation, we will be providing to awarded communities $30,000 over a 2-year period to fund that local community coordinator and support program implementation activities. Participating communities will be required to come up with a $10,000 match. And I've had some questions about the match already as well. You don't necessarily have to have all of that match up front at the time that you apply, but you need to have a plan for how you're going to raise those funds and bringing in those funds over the 2-year period. We will again be providing technical assistance through an assigned coach. And the purpose of that coach will be to help facilitate some sessions in the community, but primarily it's to help your core leadership team in the community and the coordinator with model questions, ensuring you're on track, and connecting you with resources, because again, this has been implemented in hundreds of communities across the country. So it's about ensuring that you're implementing it in accordance with the model as designed. And if you run into roadblocks and stumble a bit, help you in problem solving through that, because there's other communities who have probably run into the same things. And if you haven't done so already, our applications are already open. They're up on our website, and I encourage you to get in, log in, take a look at the application, because some of the tools that we're going to be talking about specifically today are attachments to the application, and you will be able to download those once you're logged in, and you can see the questions that we're asking in the application. You have time. Again, applications are not due until August 16th. So as we're doing this webinar series, in each one of these, we're going to be covering content and components of the application, and you'll be leaving with homework that you can start working on. But you have several months to really begin this process and vet whether Community Heart and Soul is the best fit for your community and whether you're ready for that. Speaking of readiness, that's going to be our primary focus of our discussion today. And what I will be doing is handing it over to Sarah and Ian to lead you through a discussion on that today and some exercises. So today's content, again, we're going to be focused on community readiness and a tool you will be using and will be part of your grant application called the Community Readiness Inventory. If you've taken a look at our application already, we're focused on narrative questions 1 through 3 today. And then we'll also be talking about the local institution resolution and giving you an introductory discussion of the project coordinator. That will follow up in an email to you with a job description for the project coordinator following today's session. We will wrap back around on all 3 of these items after we go through the exercise and review with Sarah and Ian. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah Leitner, the Senior Program Director with Community Heart and Soul, and one of the coaches, Ian Moran, who is also a Senior Program Associate, and they will be primarily delivering content to you today. With that, I'll hand it over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Jennifer. Ian and I are so happy to be with everyone today. This is a great opportunity really for us to be able to share with you all sorts of information that's really going to help you with your application as you're thinking about and planning for all the different aspects of your application, which also involves, getting out in your community and doing some fun work and some fun activities. So as our screen says, today we're really focusing on the 4 elements of heart and soul readiness. And this is, again, the first of 3 webinars that we will be with all of you starting today, and then another one in June and another one in July. So since most or, all or most of you have been part of these, part of an introductory session in April, we're really just going to dive in. And today, this is what we would like to cover. We're going to start with a fun activity just to share some ideas and talk about your hopes for the future of your community. Kind of around the idea of like, why are you really interested in learning more about Community Heart and Soul and the possibility of bringing it to your community? Then we're going to have a brief description of talking about Community Heart and Soul with your friends and neighbors, maybe people who haven't already been to one of the webinars, to learn a little bit more about Community Heart and Soul in a way that you can connect with them. And then next, we're going to dive into the 4 elements of readiness, the activity, and have a closer look at that readiness inventory that Jennifer talked about. That is a main component of the Innovia Community Heart and Soul application. And finally, Jennifer's going to finish up with connecting this specifically to the Heart and Soul application. And we'll talk a little bit about next steps and strategizing for what you as a community team or group of people can do next in getting yourselves ready for the application. And then moving on to thinking about the next webinar next month. All right, so to move on to what we want to talk about today is this community workbook, which I think some of you may have a hard copy. When we were at the Leadership Summit in March, we had a big stack of those. I think there was one on every table. If you weren't there, no worries. It's also available on the Innovia Community Heart and Soul website. Ian just put that in the chat for you. There's a nice download that you can get it there. It's an electronic, kind of ebook that you can flip the pages, which we'll be using mostly today as our screen share for you. But what we really want to do is just show you, kind of connect you to where we are in this workbook and how you as a community can use this as your guide throughout the next few months as you're working on your application and are involved in all the different activities with Community Heart and Soul. So before we dive into looking at that, I want to just talk a little bit about some of these activities. When we look in the book and when we start talking today, you'll see all sorts of different activities within the Getting Started community workbook. And this is a way for you as a community group or a group of people who are interested to really take this community workbook and, run with it, have fun with it, do some activities, do some fun things in your community. One of the things that we sometimes say is, doing community engagement is kind of like exercising a muscle. The more you do it, the more comfortable it becomes, the easier it becomes. And really the more fun it becomes as you start adding more people into the activities and things that you're doing. And the goal really is, as you're doing activities in your community, you're increasing the number of residents every time. So you're building that interest and you're building that, inspiration in people of like, oh, this is kind of interesting. This is kind of fun. Let's get involved in this. And so every time you may have just a couple more people who are involved in the activities. And it really is an opportunity to explore together, to get to know new people, to generate interest in Community Heart and Soul, and really to build that momentum. And as Jennifer's going to talk a little bit too toward the end, your community or your group has, homework or ideas, things that you can do between the webinars. And all of that is really encompassed in this Getting Started workbook and then tied directly to the application process itself. All right, if Ian can share the screen, we're going to have a look at the table of contents because I thought that would be just a nice way to show you all the different sections of the Getting Started community workbook. So it's basically split up into 5 sections. And for what we're doing today, we're focused on sections 1 and 2. Section 1, we're going to dive into in just a little bit with an activity that's also in the book. Section 1 is really introducing you to Community Heart and Soul. There's language in there that you can use or adopt as you're talking to people about the model. And then section 2, that's going to be the bulk of what we're going to work on today, which is the 4 elements of readiness. So again, this is our text, so to speak, or our book that we're going to be using as we're walking through things today. All right, so let's get started. We're going to jump right into page 10. So if you do have your community workbook with you, you can turn to page 10. Otherwise, we've got it right on the screen. And I wanted to share with you this activity, which we call Hopes for the Future. And we're going to practice this a little bit today. And this might be something you want to do in your community as well. The idea of this activity is just to generate conversation around what are your hopes for your community's future. And it really focuses on what are your hopes, and then how does that tie to why you as a community group are really interested in engaging with the Heart and Soul model or doing Community Heart and Soul. And what are you really hoping that will happen community-wide by really taking on this process and making this happen in your community? And this is a discussion that really happens early on in the process because it really helps to think about that idea of hope and set the stage for this positive thinking and visioning for a community's future. And I would say that's one thing. If you weren't at our webinars in April, we had 2 webinars in April. One of the things I think that we really hit home on with Community Heart and Soul is the idea that it's just a really positive model. It starts with looking at assets and really focusing on the things that bring people together, the things that you want to do, the things that you all care about, as a way to really start conversations in a positive way. Of course, other things come up along the way, but starting at that positive place is it's a good and it's a really healthy place to start conversations in the community. So when we talk about hopes for the future, this is something I wanted to describe before we head into the activity. We're really talking about broad conversations, broad hopes for the future. As an example, we're talking about maybe a hope for the future might be something like, I really hope that we can bring all of our residents together in conversation. Or I hope that we are able to increase our community engagement or our civic engagement across our community. So as you see, it's not something that's really specific, like an action or a project, because those come later. You heard Jennifer say that one of the products or the outcomes of Community Heart and Soul is a community action plan. And those are where those actions come out. But to start the conversation, we're starting broader. I kind of think of it as like an umbrella. So what we would like to do today is just try this out. And I know some of you are off camera. That's okay. If you are able to pop on, that would be great, just for this little bit of our activity today. What we would like to do is divide everyone into breakout rooms. And if you've been on Zoom calls before, you probably know about breakout rooms where this magical thing happens where Rachel's going to press a button and everybody goes into a room with new people that's smaller. And what we'd like you to do is just talk a little bit about what are your hopes for your community's future? Why are you on this call today? What are you hoping to see for your community? And we'll give each group 5 minutes to discuss. It'd be great if you have 5 or 6 people in your group that you're able just to go around and talk about it. What are the things that you're hoping for? And I think Ian's going to put that in the chat so that that'll carry through to your breakout group. It would be great if somebody in your group could jot down some of the things that you hear, because we're going to afterwards just have a couple minutes to talk about some of the things that you heard in your breakout group. So Rachel, if you can make the magic happen, we'll see everybody back in about 5 minutes. I think we probably almost have everybody back now. So I would love to hear from you. You can either put a couple things in the chat, or we'd love it if somebody would be brave and come off mute and tell us a little bit about what you heard in your group. What were some of the things that were mentioned as hopes for your community's future? And if you could tell us before, if you do come off, or even if you write in the chat, if you're comfortable, if you could say the name of your community, that would be wonderful too.
I'll start. I'm Marie Demkowski. I'm the executive director of the Pullman Chamber of Commerce. And, we had several people in the room. Hi, Jessica. We had several people in the room, all of us from different communities. Ironically, one who lives here in Pullman but was representing Moscow, one who lives in St. Mary's, where the Moscow person and I are both from. So it was, we spent the first 5 minutes just doing a kumbaya. But I think one of the things that I kept hearing is really just that communication, and how do we communicate with our community so that you can move forward in whatever direction that happens to be. But communication, I think, and communication for me has always been key. So Maureen, would you say that was correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. I heard communication, creating cohesion amongst the various nonprofits and groups, figuring out how to come together to be better stewards of what is actually wanted and needed. So, yeah, we've got a lot in common.
Wonderful. So I'm just writing some things down: communication, creating cohesion, coming together. And that communication really being the piece that when you can get that figured out, a lot of great things can happen. Love to hear from 1 or 2 more.
I'll go. So I'm Paige Olson, Executive Director of Silver Valley Economic Development Corporation and Chair of Project Uplift. I am service like the Silver Valley, so up in northern Idaho in the Panhandle. We had people of all different areas, but the big thing was, also like cohesiveness within
Mhm.
our kind of little bubbles of where we serve. And then to strengthen like the heart of our cities and centers and businesses and help support and keep people to draw people to those areas.
Mhm. Great. Cohesiveness, strengthening the heart
Yeah,
of the cities, bringing people
conversations. Yeah.
together. Wonderful.
Yep.
One
And to
more if I
make
could
sure
get,
that the
oh,
sense
go
of
ahead.
community, sorry, and one of the things like to make sure that the sense of community is not lost in
Mhm.
those areas that are growing, to keep the conversations from those people from a broader audience.
Wonderful. Thank you. Maintaining and retaining a sense of community. How about one more? I'd love to hear one more. You can write things in the chat as well. That would be great too. And Connie, I see you talking, but I can't hear you. Luckily, I switched over to that screen.
There we go. Can you hear me
There you
now?
go.
There we
Yep.
go. Okay, so our group was a little more specific. I'm Connie from Oakdale, a very small town south of Spokane. Our group, everybody had more of a program, hope, like something beneficial to the whole community, different ways the community, different programs that would benefit the entire community to match their needs.
Right. So looking
I
at
felt.
ways to look at the entire community as a whole and finding ways to be able to support all aspects of your community.
That's whatever their needs would be, each one.
Yep. Great. Oh, and then thank you very much, Connie. Then there's one in the chat. Oh, there's a couple in the chat. Thank you. Looking at rural communities, getting to know their neighbors, new people coming in, and how to bring people together. Yes. Ryan, talking about after a fire, to have the chance to talk about direction. You know, what do you want to do as a community? Strengthening communities, having conversations that remain positive in tone. Yes, I love that. And all of these are just such great examples of, you know, the power of starting with the positive and thinking about hopes and using that as a way to really, you know, start the conversation and the dialogue about what really matters to people. It's also, I think, a good way to use some of that language, you know, coming from you. We're going to move now into a conversation about a little bit about something that we call the grocery line chat. You could also call it an elevator speech. You know, there's all sorts of little, you know, terms for this, but it's basically, how do you as a community member or someone who's, you know, economic development person, all the different kind of roles that we play, say you're talking to your neighbor, or you're talking to a friend or somebody that you know, and we'll get to this in a little bit. Ian's just about to start on another part that connects to this, but say you're wanting to invite them to be part of a conversation or invite them to come to a time when you're going to talk about, you know, you're going to dive into something with around community heart and soul. How can you talk to them about this? Say they haven't come to any webinar. They haven't looked at the website. They have no idea what community heart and soul is, but you're wanting to get people involved. You're wanting to reach out to the new residents that were mentioned in the chat or other parts of the community. How can you, like in a nice little short package, you know, it can't be 5 minutes long. You're looking for something kind of short and sweet. How can you talk about community heart and soul? So we've come up with, if you can go back, Ian, yeah, there you go. We've come up with a little bit of a like formula, so to speak, which I hesitate to use that word because it's not really a formula. It's just like, oh, these are some of the things that you could use when you're talking to someone, as to like, how would you frame this if you're trying to bring somebody into a conversation? So we talk about the first thing being that describe community heart and soul. What is community heart and soul? There's all sorts of language in the readiness guide. There's language on the Innovia community heart and soul page. Actually, that page is a wonderful resource. They have built that out so nicely with all sorts of links and language that's really useful in terms of learning more about community heart and soul. But you don't want to say something that's going to sound jargony or has all sorts of language in it that seems not like real. Describing community heart and soul, how would you do that? Maybe this is just it's a way for our community to come together to find out what our residents, what we all care about. What are the things that as a community matter most to us? This process, community heart and soul, can help us do that. Another thing that we think is a really good component of a grocery line chat, we call it, or like, the way that you're connecting with someone in your community, is to personalize your message. What's your involvement in heart and soul? Maybe you've gone to a webinar or two, or maybe you are, you've read about it, or you want to be part of the group that's going to work on the application. So find that way to talk about how you're involved in it, and why do you care? Why does it matter to you that this is important? And then talking about a goal or outcome, something tangible, something that's like, this isn't just a process for us to get together and talk about things, but what can community heart and soul, help to improve in our community? This is really going to be a way for us to strengthen our relationship with each other, or this is going to help us find out what are the things that people care about so that we can focus on those things as we make decisions about our future. Again, like something tangible, a goal or an outcome that this is going to do for your community. And finally, and I'm kind of queuing this up for Ian eventually, but a call to action. What's something tangible that you can say to your friend or your neighbor? Hey, we're going to get together to have a conversation, or, we're going to have a get together to talk about how to get ready for community heart and soul. And it's going to happen next Thursday at 6 o'clock. Do you want to come? Something that is concrete that you can invite somebody to be part of. So those are just, and again, just to reference this, sometimes we do an activity where we practice that. We don't necessarily have time for that today, but if you go to, let's see, I think it's section 4 of that community workbook. That section is called Spreading the Word About Community Heart and Soul. I see Connie has her workbook right there. There it is. If you go to section 4, there's a whole section there about how to put your grocery line chat together, how to talk about community heart and soul with community leaders. Sometimes we do an activity where we talk about how would you tailor your message differently for different people? How would you talk to maybe a high schooler about being part of community heart and soul, the effort in your community? So I really encourage you just to take a look at that section of the workbook, because there are some really good ideas in there for how to talk about community heart and soul and how to get other people involved. As we talked about before, like building that momentum and kind of building that circle. So little by little, you're adding a couple more people every time to the conversation. All right, now I'm going to pass it over to Ian. And he's also going to be sharing the workbook, but maybe in a little bit. And he's going to dive into our main content today, which is about readiness for community heart and soul. So over to you, Ian.
Thanks, Sarah. So yes, I'm going to first of all share the workbook. And we're now looking at page 14. Let me just go back to page 14. There we go. So we're talking about the elements of readiness. And what do we mean by readiness? Well, readiness is a term that we use to talk about the current conditions in your community that might be a great thing for heart and soul, or it may be a challenge for you. So the community conditions, they're a mix of the knowledge, the attitudes, the skills, the resources, the relationships and vision held by your community. And these are things that make your community unique when it comes to heart and soul readiness. So the community conditions, they signal not only how well a community is poised to begin heart and soul, but also if you need to have just a little bit of special attention in order to embark on and maintain your effort. And if we look at the 4 elements of readiness, the first one is community interest. So our residents and leaders interested and willing to commit to heart and soul. Community leadership. Do formal, informal leaders in the community make decisions based on what matters most to residents? Is there an interest in sharing leadership and ensuring opportunities for new leaders to come forward? Relationships and community culture. Do residents from different backgrounds engage with and trust each other? Do community organizations communicate and collaborate to address local needs and issues? And then the 4th one is resources. Are there financial and human resources available to implement heart and soul? So in terms of the elements of readiness, it's the reason why it's important to consider these. First of all, that there's no perfect version of heart and soul readiness. Every community is unique, and every community will have different areas where they're stronger or where they're challenged. And the tool that we use in the Community Heart and Soul workbook is the Readiness Inventory. And you can see just on the other page, we have the beginning of the inventory. And it's broken down across those 4 areas with individual questions or sentences, just to give you a little bit more about what we're talking about within each category. And what we ask is that everybody goes through this individually, and you put a check in whichever column you think is most appropriate under each one. So for example, for community interest, my community has an interest, need, and or a general desire for community heart and soul. So you'd say whether or not you've considered that in your community as a strength, an opportunity. It's mixed. It could go either way depending on who you're speaking to, or you're just not sure because you haven't come across that in your community. So that's something that you'd need to discuss further with other people. And then once you do this individually, normally you would then get together in a group and you'd compare scores. And then you're looking to see, which elements of these need that special attention. Where are you going to focus as you put forward your application, but also when you start heart and soul? What are those things you think you might need to work a little harder on just to make heart and soul a success? So I'm just going to stop sharing again. And we're just now going to do some polls. Rachel is going to put the first poll up on the screen related to one of those questions. And if you can just specify if you consider this a strength, an opportunity, mixed, or unsure. So my community has interest in improving communication.
It just disappeared.
Oh, and there's the results. So we had 38% felt it was a strength, 25% an opportunity, 38% mixed, and nobody was unsure about it, which is a good thing that you know your community. So I was wondering if anybody wanted just to either put in the chats or just to come off mute and say why you chose one of those options, why you chose whether it's a strength, an opportunity, or mixed. Yes, Ginny, I see you got your hand raised.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of division within our community. So definitely mixed on almost every opinion. So this would fall under that.
Yeah, and that's very common in heart and soul communities that we work with initially. That yes, there's some organizations that might be working really well together, but then yes, as you say, there could be some division where people have stopped communicating, and this is the work that you need to do to try and bring them back together again. Yes, Michael, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I did strength, seeing some members from Pullman's community here today, just organically, so that's awesome. And then the question itself, it asks for interest, need, or general desire. And so I think even if it's a mixed environment that Gina was saying, that just shows that there's a need. Like there needs to be more collaboration, there needs to be more talking. So I think it can quickly, everyone can shift to that strong strength. We're obviously in it together and stronger together.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we have another poll question now. So if Rachel, if you could share that one. So the next one, my community provides meaningful public participation opportunities for people from all backgrounds. Is that a strength, an opportunity, mixed, or unsure in your community? Okay. Rachel, do you want to share the results? Okay, so this time less people felt it was a strength, and then we've got more or less the same, either found an opportunity or mixed. So again, would anybody like to comment on why you chose one of those options?
Can I comment again?
Yes, of course.
Well, I think that we allow participation in terms of hearing voices, but I think that it's very, very mixed in terms of what voices are actually heard or given any weight or considered a viable comment.
Yeah.
My comment was going to be similar to hers in that we haven't had a lot of opportunity for that in Oakstelle, but Monday night we had a Novia meeting in Oakstelle and we had a great turnout, and we have the same kind of a thing. We have a group that they're very involved with the school activities, very, very involved. Those were not the ones that were at this meeting. It was the other groups of people. And I saw it as a very exciting thing because they're generally the ones that aren't heard from as much. And they came and they shared their ideas, and I've been getting phone calls and texts and, well, I didn't say this at the meeting, but what about this? And so I see this as a very exciting opportunity to create some energy and some change that hasn't happened for quite a while.
That sounds great. And yes, very much in heart and soul, we recognize that in communities, quite often you just have the same people that show up to events or to meetings. So to have a different group of people involved, I think that's wonderful. And yeah, able to come together and have a positive influence over what happens in your community.
Very exciting.
Okay, we've got one more poll. Let's have the final one. So human resources are available to support the first steps of community heart and soul. Is that a strength, an opportunity, mixed, or unsure?
Mhm.
Okay, Rachel. Let's see. Okay, so spread pretty evenly between the first three, mix slightly higher. But yes, we had 21% strength, 26% opportunity, 37% mixed, and then some people are unsure about this one. And this is quite often because if you're not familiar with everything that's happening in the community, and particularly, what resources are there, then you're more likely to be unsure about this one. Would anybody like to comment on this one and why you answered and chose one of those options? Either if you want to just put it in the chat. Okay, I see you've got some messages in the chat. Unsure if you mean like a proper HR or people in the community. So yes, we're talking about people in the community. So yes, we're not talking about human resources in terms of people that work for the town. We're looking at, what are those resources in terms of people power to actually get the work done.
Just recently went through the leadership sessions with RDI.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do have a strong community involvement at this point after going through that. And it's really interesting because a lot of us really hadn't talked before. And so it brought voices from a lot of different angles. So I'm excited to see where it goes from there.
Right. You see, Susan said, we have several segments of the community who care deeply about the town and our future. I'm just not sure that the various groups have much contact with each other. So that would be definitely something that you could mark down as a priority, that you want to find a way to start to bring those groups together. And then I see another comment, we're a non-profit hospital, or there's a lot of support, fiscal stewardship is important. So that just gives you an idea of the types of things that we're looking to try to achieve through the Community Readiness Inventory. And what I wanted to do now is just share another screen to give you a little bit of background about my own experience with Community Heart and Soul. So let me just share my screen again. And this will tie it to what we've just been talking about with the Community Readiness Inventory. So what you see on the screen here, this is going back to 2019, so nearly 5 years ago. And you might see that the person in the middle of that photograph is actually me. And this was when I first found out about Community Heart and Soul for my own community. So I live in New Jersey. I live in South Jersey, though. So it's much more rural where I live, southern part of the state, a lot of farmland. We've got the Delaware Bay. So really beautiful part of the state. And an organization called the Community Foundation of South Jersey, very much like Innovia Foundation, they worked with Community Heart and Soul to create a program called Transform South Jersey. And so like the process you're going through now, I found out about it, and we also had to do an application process, and we had to do the readiness inventory. So what you see on the screen in terms of the photograph is the first meeting that we had in my town. And so I did a number of posts on Facebook initially, first of all, just to start to generate interest. So that one's the bottom left. And I was just telling people a little bit about Community Heart and Soul. And when we talked about the grocery line speech, I mean, effectively what I tried to do was to put that into my Facebook post. So I talked about, this is a great opportunity for us. What heart and soul would bring to the community, and try to give a call to action about getting people involved. And then the second post is actually a further call to action. Again, I'm saying a little bit more about community heart and soul, and that it's a step-by-step roadmap to help us shape a better future for Winslow Township. And again, asking people to get involved. You can see there's some comments there. Some people saying very interested. Somebody else just tagging other people. And that led to this first meeting. And you can see there's, what, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 of us in a room. And this was in our local library, because we wanted to choose a neutral venue. So somewhere that we felt that everybody would feel comfortable, because we wanted to make sure that we were following the first principle of community heart and soul, which is involve everyone and giving everybody the opportunity to participate. And at this meeting, we actually went through the readiness inventory. I had paper copies available and handed it out to everybody. And everybody, first of all, went through it themselves, checked where they thought each one applied for our community. And then we all got together and we discussed it and worked out, okay, I personally was more involved in the township. I was the president of the soccer association. So I knew somewhat how different parts of the town operated. But there's other people here that they were residents in the town, hadn't really been involved in anything in the past. So they didn't know how the town operated. And so we had different scores there. So that was a great opportunity for us to have a conversation about what's happening in our town, how we feel about it, what we want to see in the future. It's just, the readiness inventory is a great way just to generate that conversation. And as you can see, like I said, there's a handful of people here at our first meeting. And then we had another meeting a few weeks later, and we had more people, and it built from there. And that's really what you're looking for, is get some interest, get a handful of people that want to talk about this, want to move forward, want to be positive, and then they can talk to their friends, they can talk to their neighbors. And when we talk about the grocery line speech or posts that you're putting through social media or other ways that you're communicating with your friends and neighbors, it's a conversation. You're not making a speech. You're just having a conversation with somebody, either in the school line when you're waiting to pick up your children, or at the grocery store, or just any activities that you're participating in your community. That's the way to try and get more people involved. Just to say, I really like this. I think you might too. So I will stop sharing there. And so I just wanted to go through the next steps once you have done your readiness inventory. So with regards to community interest, you need to think about what community groups or leaders would benefit from learning more about heart and soul. So if that's something that you feel you could concentrate on, how could you go about improving that? Or with community community leadership, what opportunities are there to cultivate new leaders? So is there opportunities to involve youth organizations? Is there a Rotary Club or a Lions Club in your community? And are they making efforts to attract newer and younger members? And could they be the leaders of the future? And what are the best ways to utilize the existing strengths in your community? And then in terms of relationships and community culture, how might heart and soul improve the culture of civic life in your town? And then finally, resources. So we had a question about resources. Is it about HR in terms of the local municipality, the government? But really it's what resources are needed to ensure heart and soul is successful. And on that, I'm going to pass to Sarah. She's going to talk a little bit more about one of those resources, which is really important as you go through Community Heart and Soul.
Thanks, Ian. And just to let everyone know too, we're going to have plenty of time at the end for you to ask questions. So we'll have opportunities to, ask Ian questions about his experience as a community member, navigating all this, questions to Jennifer about the application. So we'll have plenty of time. But what I wanted to talk about a little bit before we move into the next section is to talk about the project coordinator. And this is just to kind of put this on your radar and to have you start, just kind of thinking about it, is to talk a little bit about the structure of how this all actually happens in a community. So as Jennifer said, Inovia Foundation is providing the coach, the heart and soul coach, who really helps a community navigate through the process. The coach helps work through all the different phases of the process and is there to guide the community team through heart and soul. There is also a local project coordinator, and that coordinator is most of the time, 95% of the time, is somebody who is from the, probably 99, honestly, from the community, somebody who knows the community, understands the workings, understands what's going on, how people are connected, understands the community calendar, is like, oh, we should never have a meeting on Thursday night because that, something else is going on Thursday night, as an example. That person just has their finger on the pulse of what's going on. That person also has some experience coordinating things, events, maybe has some experience doing a little bit of volunteer management. Because as we've talked about before, Community Heart and Soul, we talk about it as a resident-driven model. It means most of the things that are happening with Community Heart and Soul are really driven by a volunteer group of residents who have come together to really make this happen in their community. So the coordinator may have some experience, like bringing people together, keeping volunteers. We have a colleague who talks about keeping volunteers fed and watered, keeping volunteers happy and inspired and motivated, and making sure that people who are volunteering are doing the things that they love to do as a volunteer. So that person maybe has some experience with that. Probably some sort of a background in understanding a little bit of technology in terms of how to keep track of things. We've got a couple tools that communities use to varying degrees in terms of, a Google sheet, a spreadsheet that helps communities keep track of volunteers' names and addresses and phone numbers, and keep track of different milestones, which we'll talk about in just a second. So anyway, that you don't need to have this person identified right now. You don't even have to have them identified when you turn in your application, but just thinking about who is a person in the community who would be really good at that. The other couple things as well to say about that. That person is called a coordinator for a reason, a coordinator and not a manager. They're coordinating all sorts of things and people and ideas, but they're not a manager who's in charge, who's like in charge of things, because that coordinator is working hand in hand, side by side with this volunteer team, with sub-teams who are gathering stories, who are planning events, who are working with all sorts of other things. So that's why we call that person a coordinator. I also want to give you a few examples, and we'll have so much more time to talk about this, but just give you a few examples of successful coordinators that we've seen in other communities. We have coordinators who are retired teachers. And we actually, I'm sure we'll be sharing these with you maybe in another, probably next month. We have a new video series where we have a couple of interviews with coordinators. One of them is this retired teacher who says, of course I'm good at this job because I know 33 years of kids and their parents, generations of families, and nobody is going to say no to Mrs. Brewer. So she's just this great connection in the community to bring people together as the coordinator. We have other coordinators who are, different, have played a role in the community, maybe as a nonprofit director or staff person. We have a couple where we've had like two people do the job together. It's less common, but that it can be in some places it has been a shared role. Ian, do you have ideas of or examples of another coordinator or two that you're thinking of?
So, I've worked with a couple of coordinators. One that I've worked with in New York State, she has been really successful in coordinating with younger members of the community because she previously was doing work with families with disabled children. And so she'd already built up a huge network amongst the younger families in that town. So yeah, just having those connections, that was really useful. And then another town that I've worked with, that coordinator had a background in working in mental health. And again, using all the skills that they developed over a period of time in terms of organization and connecting with different organizations and different services, again, was really useful as a coordinator.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Ian. Yeah, so it's really having that, tapping that person in your community who has connections, who understands the community, who has some time. And, part of the Inovia grant can provide for some compensation for that person too. So I think in the follow-up email, Jennifer will be sending, or Rachel will be sending just a sample job description for you to have and look at and think about. So, you just kind of continue to think about and roll that around and come up with ideas for who would be really good at this job for our community. Again, it's like a 18-month to 2-year position, part-time. So some people do it alongside other things that they do. But we just wanted to kind of put that out there so you can start thinking about that idea. Jennifer, I think, oh no, I have one more slide. I have one more slide and then I'll pass it to you. Ian, if you can just share that milestone slide. So in Community Heart and Soul, we have what we call a roadmap. And part of that roadmap is having different milestones that go with each phase of the Heart and Soul model. So I just wanted to show you the milestones for getting started. And just with a kind of look at this, we are, if you came to one of the April webinars, you've learned about the process throughout the community. It's a way for, to just learn more about Community Heart and Soul so you can check off number 1. Today, we've given you the tools to go out and explore community strengths and opportunities with people in your community. Maybe you'll do that, have that conversation a few different times with different groups, just make a bunch of photocopies of the inventory, use the inventory from the application. Jennifer can talk about that because there are a few more on the bottom of the inventory that are Inovia specific. And Jennifer, maybe you can talk a little bit about that. But anyway, in terms of the milestones, that's where we are now. And over the next 2 webinars, one in June and one in July, we will look at a few more of those milestones as we explore more topics about getting started with Community Heart and Soul. All right, I'm going to pass it back to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Sarah and Ian. It's been really helpful. Thank you for going over these program specifics today. So I want to wrap up a little bit with getting back to nuts and bolts in the application. and want to move through this fairly quickly so we have a chance to get to questions here before we're done today. Right, hopefully it's going to cooperate for me today. There we go. As Sarah referenced, and it's in your community workbooks, and I saw several of you have those open while we were talking today. In addition, we have the Community Readiness Inventory in the grant application. So if you haven't logged in yet, I encourage you to log in, identify who's your person that's going to be submitting the grant application, have them log in if it's not you, and you will be able to download a couple of the documents that you will then be turning around and uploading as a part of your grant application. One of those is the Community Readiness Inventory, which we went through today. And as Sarah mentioned, we encourage you to print out copies, and maybe you're going to do these with different groups. So for example, as you're trying to build up and assess your community readiness for this program, maybe you're going to talk to a few groups, like maybe it is the Lions Club, maybe it's Rotary, maybe there's a gathering of some of your nonprofit organizations, maybe there's an opportunity to do this with your city officials. And so you have a few different opportunities, and so you may be printing out different copies of this readiness inventory to use with those different groups. But ultimately, with your grant application, what you're going to want to do is culminate those results, kind of average out what you've gotten, and into a single community readiness inventory that you will upload with your application. And as Sarah mentioned, we have a couple of questions at the bottom of the community inventory that apply to some of our other programs through Innovia Foundation. We're asking about readiness for our Launch Northwest program, so our scholarship program. And right now that is also open for grant applications. The timelines are the same as our Community Heart and Soul. So Launch Northwest right now is, once again, grant technical assistance program, but it's really geared around community scholarship raising and with matching with resources that are available through Innovia Foundation to provide post-secondary scholarships to students in your area. And I know many of your communities are interested in Launch Northwest and planning to apply, and you can do so. You can apply for both programs. And so there's a couple of questions down at the bottom specific to Launch Northwest, as well as a couple of questions that are around planned giving and our 5% planned giving campaign. Those aren't required elements for the Community Heart and Soul program. Many of your communities, what's going to make sense is start with Community Heart and Soul. Do some community building, get the community collectively on the same page and understand what that collective vision is. And as you move forward, you might find that these other programs dovetail into that collective community vision. And so you want to look at those as secondary pieces down the road. But we have a couple of questions built into the Community Readiness Inventory now. For those of you who may be considering those programs as well, or want to understand where your community may be relative to those programs. Second, we have 3 narrative questions that relate to the conversation that we were having today. In one of those narrative questions, we're asking you to describe your community, the demographics, the geographic area. I know from talking to many of you that you are defining community differently, and you can do that with this program. Some of you are looking at your geographic area as your municipal boundaries, your city. Others of you are looking at potentially implementing this program across a county. Some of you are looking at implementing it across a couple of cities because that's what makes sense for your community. So we're leaving that open to you because this is about implementing this program in a way that makes sense for your community. And that starts with defining your community. So that's what we're asking you to do in this first narrative question. In the second narrative question, we're asking you to explain why Community Heart and Soul is a good fit and tie that to what you've learned through your Community Readiness Inventory. So where do you have strengths? Where do you have opportunities? Where do you have mixed results? Who did you reach out to? Give us some sense of how you have assessed your readiness for this program, because what we're looking from an evaluation standpoint is we want to award grants and work with those communities who have done this homework and have gotten themselves up to a point that when awarded the grant, they're ready to hit the ground running. And that means you're going to have work to do. Everything is not going to be a strength, as one of you pointed out in the comments section earlier. So it's okay that you have strengths, you have opportunities, you have mixed results, you have all the different spectrums of the readiness inventory. We expect that. And every community is going to look a little bit differently. But what we're looking for is, have you assessed where you are and are you ready to take on this work? And then finally, we want to have an understanding about other community planning efforts that you have undertaken previously. Many of you have done visioning planning efforts, or you have recently completed comp plans, or you are in the process with comp plans in your community. We just want to understand what other community efforts have been undertaken. So if you are selected as our coaches are working with your communities, we have that in mind and are thinking about how we undertake and how this effort is going to work best so we don't get fatigue, planning fatigue, which can sometimes happen in communities as well. Some of you may find as you're going through this process and assessing readiness that you have done so much planning recently that now just isn't the time for more. You need to take a break. Don't worry, we expect there will be future funding rounds as well. So if this isn't a one and done opportunity through the foundation. And again, one of your other documents that you have in the application for download is a sample resolution. So you are required to have a resolution for one or more local institutions where they understand that the community is undertaking the Community Heart and Soul program. They are interested in participating in a way that fits with them. And they're interested in hearing a report and considering how to bring elements from your ultimate plan and your ultimate document, your efforts, into future planning processes and implementation of that institution. We've given you a little bit of flexibility through our program as to what your local institution may be. It might be one city and your city council. It might be 2 city councils because you're looking at crossing across multiple cities. It might be your county commissioners because you're looking at countywide. It might be most related to the work that your port is doing or your library district is doing. So the institution is meant to be an institution of local government, but in our various communities, we have different institutions of local government. So this is about what fits with how you're defining community and what fits with your community. Who is your local institution leader that you look to in the community? So you have a sample resolution. It's in there as a Word document, so you can take it and modify, insert jurisdiction name, and your jurisdiction can make modifications as they see appropriate, but you need to have a resolution from at least one local institution with your grant application. That is a required upload. And with that, we want to open it to all of you with questions that you may have. And I've also included in here, again, if you have not been on our website already, here's the link to our website specific to Community Heart and Soul. We encourage you with specific questions to call the office, reach out to us. And I've also included my direct email. And feel free to reach out to me if you have specific questions. And even if that's give you a call back, you would like to have a conversation. Again, this program is meant to fit with your community and what works with your community. So I expect that we will be having some individual conversations. I've had some with many of you already, and it's been the start of a conversation. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Hopefully everyone got that off the screen. I will put it in the chat box as well, so I can open up our screen so we can all see one another. And feel free to use the chat box for questions, or if you want to raise your hands. And if it doesn't get too crazy, we'll just open it up to if you just want to unmute yourself and ask a question. We are here to answer those for a few minutes today.
I have a question for Ian. When you said you put out your Facebook posts, and then at your meeting you had 8 people. Did you select 8 specific people to be at the meeting, or did you only have 8 that expressed an interest?
Thanks, Connie. That was the only people that came to that first meeting. But the second meeting we had about 20 people. So a lot of communities find initially it's a very small group of people that buy into heart and soul, get excited about it, and they're the initial core group of people that are going to do the organizing. But you should always be trying to attract new people for your next meeting. So we often see it grows a little bit each time. Okay. So those 8 people, they talk to other people, they start to generate that interest, use their grocery line speech, and get some more people.
Okay.
But yes, you can also target. I mean, definitely, if you want to be strategic about it and think like, who are the people you want in the room, you want to get as diverse a group of people as possible. So from different parts of the town, different ages, different professions. So yes, ideally you want to get a broad cross section of your population.
Okay.
I think Maureen has her hand up now.
I have a question about on the stipulations of how the money can be spent on activities. I understand it's to cover the costs of hiring a program coordinator and activities, and I'm wondering if by activities is meant the actual organizing of the communication and the assembly of people, or the activities that are identified by this group as something that we want the community to have going forward.
Thank you for the question, Maureen. I think for most of you, what you're going to find is it's the activities of bringing the community together. So that could be refreshments, that could be markers, clipboards, all kinds of those things. And for some of you, you may be bringing in match yourselves, where you will have funds that could eventually go towards activities. But for most of you, it will be the activities of the community organizing. In the webinar 3 that we'll be offering in June, we're specifically going to be getting into the budget and what different examples of budgets that we've seen in heart and soul communities, and how to think about putting your budget together. So appreciate the question today, and know we'll be doing a deep dive as we move forward.
Thank you.
Any other questions today? I know we're getting close to the end of our time, so if you don't have any additional, that's okay too. Connie, did you have something?
Well, I always have more, but you made the comment, who is your local institution leader? Are you referring to which organization, which institution
Yes.
do you see as the most, okay, not a specific
Yes.
person? Okay.
Yes, yes. Yes, Maureen.
Just one more question. Once we go through this process, I'm wondering if being a candidate or a recipient would pave the path for future support going forward to, again, like it's the activities that are the result of this process that I'm mostly interested in. And could you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, I can speak to that. So we're having internal conversations about that right now too, and what that looks like with the community grants program. So for those communities who have been selected as community heart and soul communities, certainly as we look at prioritizing funding in those areas, how that ties to community heart and soul plans will be something that we will be looking at, and whether there can be funding designated specifically to activities out of community heart and soul. That's certainly something that we're talking about too. So we certainly what we don't want to have happen, and we're very sensitive, as I know all of you are too, is you don't want to go through another planning process and not see anything come out of that. So we recognize that as well. And so that's a priority on our end as we're talking about future funding.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for your time this afternoon. And it's likely for many of you, the question or comment did not come up today during the webinar, but as you get into this, get looking at the workbook, start doing the work, it will come up. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. And for those of you who have some of our rural engagement staff regularly in your community, for many of you, you know Nolan, you know Christy, who are on the call today, just a sneak peek, they are coaches in this program. So feel free to tap them as well when they're out in community as well. Molly, Scott, any of our staff at the foundation. We've worked really hard to bring our staff along as well, so they're really poised to help you with the program. But if you have specifics about your community eligibility for the program, I encourage you to reach out to me directly, because I'm kind of living and breathing this daily. I'm the one leading this effort right now. So please reach out to me, but don't hesitate to reach out to any of our other staff as well. So we look forward to partnering with you and look forward to seeing you next month on our next call, and good luck with all of your homework.